BPM. Everything's falling apart here, look. That's cool, isn't it? Right, so I hope everyone's kind of cool out there. Bit of a difficult time, appreciate that. Thank you for joining me on this channel. Before I get into the video, if you want to like and subscribe, hopefully you'll find some use on this channel. I'm a guitarist, and there's loads of stuff for guitarists to check out on this channel. Hopefully there's something in there for you. So if you want to like and subscribe, that'd be super appreciated at this time when all my gigs are cancelled. So I was on a live stream yesterday and the day before, and Ujwal Gupta, which I'm going to take a guess is an Indian name, but I don't actually know where he's from, or she, asked about time feel, or how I've worked on time feel, or how I would work on time feel. Time feel to me as a phrase didn't really crop up until I saw possibly someone like Tom Quayle using it, or is it as an Italian guitarist, maybe with the name Lucas, I'm not sure. Anyway, but it was something, I just call it timing myself, but I was conscious that my timing wasn't what I wanted it to be. This is something that some people won't ever have to work on for some reason. Some people just naturally seem to have great timing, or they've hidden all of the practice that they've been doing on it. But my suspicion is that there's like different, a different feel for rhythm, I guess, and timing in different people. If you want to get a sense of what I mean by that, if you listen to the album Kinda Blue, Miles Davis, there's two saxophone players on a lot of the tunes. One of them is John Coltrane, who you've probably heard of, and the other is Cannonball Adderley, who you possibly would have heard of, but less likely to have heard of him than John Coltrane. And this isn't really a value judgment, but John Coltrane's playing is less metronomic and tied to the beat than Cannonball Adderley's is. Obviously there's other differences in their playing styles, but when you hear it, if you analyse John Coltrane's playing from like a timing style, he's ahead of the beat and stuff, more so than Cannonball Adderley, who seems to me to be pretty locked in at all times. So as I said, that's not a value judgment, it's just a sort of observation that I made when I listened to that album, or still listen to that album. And it's a thing, just to say that it's not something necessarily to feel terrible about if you feel like your timing isn't as good as it could be. Certainly I feel that way, and that's why I've worked on it a lot and still do. Now, most of what I'm going to say today is stuff that you could do without being in front of a guitar. I feel like I'm giving away some secrets here of my own, that if it's a bit of a silly way to feel, but this is stuff that I've been doing for a while now. When I decided that my timing wasn't what I wanted it to be, my first place to look was probably YouTube and stuff like that, and see if there were any guitarists who talked about it, but there weren't really at that time. So the next place that I went was drummers. Obviously drummers play a very important role in timekeeping, and that's kind of, I guess, what we're talking about when we're talking about time feel. We're talking about trying to keep a consistent rhythm, a consistent pulse throughout whatever we're doing. And the result of that will be that we sort of have more control over whether we are playing ahead, behind the beat, or whether we're playing with the beat at all. Certainly when I'm playing at a time, I feel completely disconnected from what's going on, and then you have to sort of take a moment and try and recalibrate. So let's get into it. I think probably one of the most useful things you could do in terms of timekeeping is probably to try and play some drums. Now obviously for all of us it's not necessarily possible to have a full drum kit in our house, but I think it's worth having awareness of basic drumming, and basic rhythm. For instance, you know, if you ever sat in front of a drum kit and done that sort of thing. So with drumming there's kind of two, I mean this is from my point of view, two things that will tell you like the level where a drummer is at, and that is consistency of tempo. So is their tempo rising and falling? You know, are they always rushing through a song, or are they always slowing down through a song, or is their tempo consistent throughout? That's one kind of measure of, you know, a drum player, a drummer, probably the word. And then the other thing is there's a thing called a flam in drumming, which is two notes or two strikes, I don't know, what do they call them, strokes, placed close together, so you get like a blat sound. That's called a flam. And when notes aren't, or notes, strikes, drum strikes aren't fully together, you get that sound of, which kind of sounds a bit neo-soul-y and fashionable at the moment, but put in certain contexts it does sound a bit like a kind of less refined drummer, shall we say. Take a sip of my drink. So if you do pay attention to drummers and listen out for consistency of timing and how much flamming there is, I think that will start to give you a sense of some of this timing stuff. And also if you try and play with drumsticks and play on like a hardish surface, you'll notice how difficult it is to get things to stop flamming if you're trying to play things together. So that sort of thing, to try and stop flams, it's difficult. Anyway, so that's about sort of being locked in with oneself and also having a consistent time, which I think is time feel. So the players that I would recommend looking into on this, there's Tony Royster does a video, Tony Royster Jr, great drummer, did a video talking about trying to stay locked in with a metronome. I think it might be a Roland video or something. That's one thing that I looked at. Let me try and think. I think there's a drummer called Joe Crabtree who talked about the importance of practicing certain rudiments and all that sort of stuff with a metronome. Is it Matt Garsker from Animals as Leaders? I think he did some stuff on this. He certainly talks about this flamming stuff, about trying to, that's one of the things that he practices, is trying to make sure that he's being super careful with whatever he's practicing to be in control of whether things are happening at the same time or apart. But the main thing that I would recommend you do is to get yourself some apps. This isn't an advert for anyone. I'll just go through some of the apps that I have on my phone. I have the Soundbrenner metronome. So probably the way that you will have heard a metronome is this. Oh, that's a point actually. So Justin, is it Justin Guitar, did a video on this stuff, and he says that the thing that is worth trying to do is to try and get the click to disappear, which shows that you are in time with it. So when it becomes sort of one sound and the click disappears, that shows that you're fully in time. Now this is something that's super hard to do. I can try and do it, but it probably won't work because that's quite a low. So I don't know if that will have worked or translated on the microphone, but the goal with that particular little exercise is to try and, as much as you can, make the click kind of fade into whatever you're playing. And this is much easier if you're doing it with tapping. With guitar it's not so easy, but it's worth trying. The cool thing about the sound metronome that I like is that you can sort of click on each beat that is there, and you can drop that beat out. So 2, 3, 4. So that's the same tempo, but I've got less clicks, so less information to rely on to tell me whether I'm in time. So that's what I would recommend doing. Drop beats out. So I'm now going to drop it out to just one beat. So I'm at 122 BPM. I'm sort of playing a half-time beat there, but now the click is only on the first quarter. So things I find super difficult to do, but I think it's worth working on and trying to get better at. So slow clicks, or like that, where you can drop out a click, are super helpful. So you can go on YouTube and you can put in metronome at pretty much any BPM and you'll find them, as far down as sort of 1, 2, 3 BPM. Everything's falling apart here, look. That's cool, isn't it? Cool. So that's my studio put back together. So where was I? Yeah, so slow clicks. The slower the better, because what it effectively will mean is that you're not relying on the click to kind of be your timekeeping device. You're sort of relying on your inner metronome, if that's a thing, your inner feeling and your inner rhythm to tell you how long those gaps are going to feel between the beat. So I think this is something that is worth talking about, because I grew up playing with a metronome for a long time. I think many of us people that have a background in kind of shred or whatever are very comfortable sitting with a metronome at these tempos and like this. But actually a metronome that's constantly going like that doesn't really require you to do any of your own sort of timekeeping, if that makes sense, because you've got that constant and a lot of information to tell you where the pulse and where the rhythm is, if that makes sense. So if you cut back, so this is at 140 BPM, if I'm going to cut out so I'm doing half of the timekeeping now. And then you cut it right back to just being on the first quarter note of the bar. You're now doing the timekeeping for you know, the rest of that bar, whereas before you were just relying on the metronome really. And that's kind of one of the things that I think might be partly responsible to do with why my timing isn't what I think it could be. I think it's potentially over-reliance on a metronome at a fast tempo. So I think that's something to be aware of and to maybe try and rectify by putting on some slower metronomes, you know, talking like 20 BPM, 10 BPM. So what would that be? So that's 140 BPM. So that was the 35 BPM metronome effectively. So you don't need to be with a guitar when you're practicing this sort of stuff. Just get a metronome app on your phone and try it out. Also then, if you are practicing scales or songs or whatever, don't be afraid to put on a slow metronome to kind of check where you're at with it. There's a video by Gilad Hekselman, or Gilad, Israeli jazz guitarist, which is super helpful, and he talks about the same thing, which is if you're playing like a certain piece, start with your metronome on every quarter note, then move it. So here's the pulse: 2 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4. So you move, reduce the metronome, and then the other thing you could do, which if you're a jazzer you're probably used to trying this, is to put the metronome on beats 2 and 4. So 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2. That's kind of a useful little tip. 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4. And then reduce it down even more. You could just put it on 4 3 4 1 4 1 2 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4. So like I was sort of discussing in the modes video that I put up yesterday, this kind of exercise is about trying to make what is constant feel like it's somewhere else. So I was talking about in the modes video, if you've got a C and you're trying to imply C Lydian, you're going to be trying to play a thing which makes it feel like the C is note 4 of the major scale, i.e. G major. The same thing with this. We've got this, which in itself is just a beat happening every 35 it's happening 35 times a minute. We've got to bring to that slower tempo our own rhythm that's going to make that, you know, the 1, the 2 or the 4 or the 3. So what I would try to do is say 3, because it's kind of difficult to start locking in with this when you first try it. Say 3 when you imagine the click is going to be 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4. And then you can move the click around in that way, and you can even do more tricky stuff, which I'm not going to demonstrate because it would just be embarrassing, where you try and put it on like a quaver. So you might go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and you put it on one of those ands. That's really, really difficult, and feels a lot like practice, to be fair, because you will probably mess up quite a lot. So those are my tips for practicing. There's also an app called Time Guru, which has this random mute function. So this is an app which I bought. So you can set a metronome, and you've also got this random mute slider which you can use to randomly drop out the metronome. So this is one of the other areas that I probably would talk about as useful. I've got a bunch of metronomes which are like 2 bars on, 2 bars off, which I got from somewhere online. I can't remember where, but I might make some of my own because I think it's a useful tool to have. So you'd have like 4 bars of click at 100 BPM and then 4 bars of no click at 100 BPM. So you're practicing whatever. A lot of this I do, as I say, in the car or away from my instrument. So you've got 4 bars of click, 4 bars without, and you've got to try and maintain a steady pulse and rhythm throughout. And for a lot of that, when I first started doing it, it's very difficult to come back in with any confidence that you're going to be still in time. That's something that I've worked on a lot. And the same sort of concept, but in a smaller way, this Time Guru app does this kind of random dropout. I mean, that's very difficult when you get it set that high, but this is just it more. Anyway, so the idea with those things is that I think it also helps to bolster that idea of not building an over-reliance on the metronome, because it's not going to be there every time. So for instance, if you've got the 2 bars on, 2 bars off, if you've got the 2 bars on, 2 bars off idea, then that gives you, 2 bars where you're responsible for the time. Or if you've got a metronome which is consistently dropping out notes in a random fashion, that means that you build up a kind of expectation that it's you that is holding the beat, not the metronome. And so then you're just monitoring whether you've held a steady beat by gauging whether that metronome still sounds like it's playing with you, if that makes sense. So those are some of my ideas. Get some drumsticks maybe and start tapping along with stuff, tapping along with a metronome. Maybe even look up some drum videos and figure out what's going on. I think that's useful from a musical sense anyway, to have like a basic understanding of drum beats and stuff. Get yourself a metronome app. So as I say, on my phone I've got Soundbrenner, which is free, and Time Guru, which I think I paid. There's also one called Polymetronome, which you can also add in polyrhythms and stuff, which can be interesting and also even more difficult. Practice with metronomes that are a really slow tempo, like start off at maybe 40 BPM and take it down even slower than that, and practice the same stuff that you would normally but with slower tempos, slower metronomes that mean that you have less information to rely on. And then play with dropping out metronomes or randomly muting metronomes that will mean that you have to be responsible for the time, and that the metronome will then just be a tool that tells you whether you kept reliable time or not. Those are my tips. I think it's kind of, a lot of this is maybe a little bit fear-based as well. So I find that I speed up myself if I've got something that I'm not completely comfortable with. That's something that I need to work on, and still do. But so that's, I think, if you listen to some music from the 60s and stuff, you'll start to hear that not everyone's timing has been perfect. I think at the moment we've got quite a lot of quantized music where it's been sort of artificially positioned to grid. So we maybe have like a false concept of what rhythm really is like from a human at the moment, because not everyone's perfect. So don't beat yourself up over it, but these are just some of the ways that I would work on it if I was interested in improving my timing. And then slow for everything helps. So legato chords, anything you're practicing, slow metronomes, and pay attention to each individual small thing. and also the larger. Here's a dog. Elsa. So this is a dog called Elsa. She's seen me working on my timing a lot. Anyway, hope that helps in some way, Ujwal. Any further questions, if you drop them in the comments, and I'll be happy to try and answer them if I can. Thank you for watching.